Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to the Eternal set review for Defiance. Today it's time to talk about the third part and last part of the Primal cards before moving on to Shadow tomorrow. But a quick thing in my own interest before moving on to the rest of the Primal cards. Please, if you want to keep the free content going and support me, consider whitelisting eternaltitans.com and YouTube on your ad block to help support the content with ads. That would really help a lot. And of course, if you enjoy the content, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel to not miss out on future content. So on to the Primal cards. Alright, so first we have Reclusive Scholar. Clearly not a constructed card. In Limited we get a 4-cost 06 with Renown, play a Cobalt Ring. So basically sort of a free blocker that if we can Renown it, we get a Cobalt Ring. Problem is neither the 06 nor the Cobalt Ring are particularly great. Cobalt Ring's activation cost of 3 is very clunky and prohibitive even in Limited. Your deck needs to be super late gamey and very controlling and defensive to afford to spend 3 power on this. If you need the relic synergies, however, this could be a decent card. But yeah, you need to also have enough ways to trigger the Renown without like throwing away resources and having enough ways to trigger Renown in general. So seems very fringe, not too likely to make it into most decks, but given the whole like relic theme they are pushing and stuff, this might be an okay card as a filler potentially in very specific decks, but yeah, don't count on it. Next we have Rejection, in another clunky counterspell. It's a 4-cost counterspell that negates an enemy spell, and then the enemy player discards all copies from their hand and deck. Rejection can't be negated. So it's a counter that can't be countered back because, you know, we all remember these many counter wars in Eternal Kappa. Yeah, so not very relevant. Then the thing that it makes them discard, very situational. So this strikes me as, if anything, at best a very specific market card. If there's like a metagame where there are a lot of big spells that are very relevant, and then this could be better in the market in some decks than the cheap counters, but it's hard to even get there in this case because the cheap counters are still so much more flexible and can save your life against aggressive decks sometimes as market cards. Well, this is very unlikely to do that. So yeah, most likely this card is just not going to see any play, just like any of the other expensive counterspells, unfortunately. And in Limited, this is not really a difference. I don't think this is playable at all. Next we have Shadowlands Border Scout, another card that we got spoiled before the set came out. It's a 4-cost 1/2 flying with Pledge. Actually has kind of a cool effect. When it hits the enemy player, you draw a card for each damage dealt. So if you buff this in some way, this can draw you a lot of cards. But in order to get there, you first have to invest 4 power into a 1/2 flying, which is a pretty miserable rate, and then it has to survive and has to not get silenced. And then you also have to have a card to buff this, and then it also has to be able to connect with the opponent and not be like blocked, for example. So you see there are a lot of ifs, and yeah, the cost to effect ratio not very good. It's an elf, which is a bit of a plus, but not a big one. Pledge is also kind of negligible, since it only works on the first turn, and this is not like a super late game card that you clearly gonna play as a power if you have it in your opening hand. Most of the time you're gonna want to keep it as a spell anyway, unless you get this like 2 power hand in the deck that usually wants 3. So yeah, not very impressive. In Limited, however, this seems good enough. It's still a bit fragile and a bit overcosted, but it's also very swingy. It's easier to make connect and even potentially draw more than 1 card per hit. So I think in Limited I would at least be fine rounding out my deck with this, and it could even turn out better than this. Not 100% sure, would have to play with it a bunch and see how it plays out in the format. But it seems like it should be a bit high variance, but has the potential to just kind of run away with the game and win the game for you. Next we have Sudden Schism, basically an additional mirror image that costs double Primal and 4, but is fast. And yeah, I mean, fast mirror images are pretty interesting. First of all, it's harder for the opponent to blow them out, because you can, for example, react to a removal with this, copy the thing they are killing, instead of the other way around a lot of the time. And also, certain summon effects become pretty interesting if they are fast, for example. And also, it can really surprise the opponent if you at the end of their turn add like a second copy of your biggest threat to the board, for example, or like copying an Aegis threat when they going for a sweeper, and then like post sweeper you copy the Aegis threat after it lost the Aegis and get a new copy of it with the Aegis still intact, and so on. So yeah, there are a bunch of cool options here. The fact that it costs 4 definitely makes it a lot worse, and Mirror Image will usually be better, but this is at least an interesting card to exist and keep in mind going forward. And in Limited, I think this is actually quite good. The fast effect has more impact there on average. I think the increased cost is less of a deal, and there are more generic fatties usually that you can just copy to get good value for your power investment. So yeah, seems like a solid card, or even good card in Limited. Depending on your deck, of course, you always have to check like how many good targets that you actively would want to copy you have to make sure this does enough on average. Next we have Cliff Diver Mantisaur. It's a 5-cost 4/3 flying Aegis that also has Pledge. I think this is almost strong enough for Constructed. It's a bit outshined by some other 5-drops, but there are not a whole lot of Aegis 5-drops. Unfortunately, Primal already has one in the Jotun Feastcaller, which will usually be better, even though this has flying. And then in like Feln, there's also Champion of Cunning. But yeah, I mean, this is easier to play than Feastcaller and has flying. But yeah, it will just be a bit too weak in Constructed, but not by a lot. Like, the card is actually quite good, and in Limited, this looks like a monster. Like, eat this Aerial Ace. This is like everything Aerial Ace wants to be, and more. Like, you get Pledge and you get 2 more attack. That's so huge. This card is a slam dunk in Limited, and I imagine it to be kind of a nightmare to play against. Next we have Elvish Swindler. This card's also quite interesting. First of all, we have these relic synergies to support. Second of all, this is card advantage. Like, it's a 5-cost 2/3 that gets you a relic that costs 2. So effectively this is a 3-cost 2/3 usually, and then you pay 2 for the relic that you get for free. So it's a 2-for-1 that is okay in power. Like, the 2/3 for 3 is obviously overcosted and constructed, but given that it's effectively a 2/3 for 3 that draws you a card, it is a pretty reasonable power rate, and cards that this can get include something like Combustion Cell, Cookbook, and a bunch of other things that are less obvious and less common, but would also be interesting. Like, I don't know, Power Stone, Sandstorm Scarf, Hourglass, and so on and so forth. There's a bunch of interesting options to consider. So this is definitely an interesting card in the long run. Right now it might not quite do enough yet. I didn't come up with any ideas in Constructed with this yet, and don't know of anyone else that had some good idea with it yet, but I think it's definitely a card that has potential to be relevant, especially with more options available to get. So yeah, keep this in mind, keep an eye on it. Gonna be interesting going forward. And in Limited, if you have some good targets for it, it seems like a pretty good card to include. Otherwise it's obviously unplayable, so kinda depends on what you have to fetch and how many cards you have. Next we have Akanta's Outrider. It's a 6-cost 3/3 flying with Pledge. It's pretty overcosted, but it costs 3 less while you have a relic. So here we are back to the relic synergies in Limited. This is a huge payoff. Like, a 6-cost 3/3 obviously is not very good. But a 3/3 flying is still pretty good, and even at 6, a 3/3 flyer is not terrible, which is not great. It's still, if you get there and tempo isn't that much of a concern anymore, having a 3/3 flyer or not having a 3/3 flyer can make the difference between winning and losing a lot of the time. And every time you have a relic early on and you jam this on turn 3, it is an absolute monster. Like, this card seems like a pretty premium common in Constructed. Just make sure that you're in a deck that has a bunch of relics for this to work, and then you just have a premium common to put in your draft deck. And even if not, it's a fine filler, I guess, without any relics. Next we have Brilliant Idea. That's one of the more interesting Primal cards for Constructed. Once again, Primal is getting the shorter end of the stick, although, to be fair, a lot of the monofaction cards in this set haven't been too impressive. Like, I have been scrounging for like top 5 lists in other colors already, like Fire, and Primal is not much better. But yeah, Brilliant Idea. I guess it's kind of their attempt at giving blue control back what they took by nerfing Channel the Tempest. So here basically, for the cost of old Channel the Tempest, 8 power, you get to draw 4 cards instead of 3 and kill something, which is not quite as good, especially given that it's still not fast, but it is decent. Like, drawing 4 cards for 8 in Eternal is decent, and there will be scenarios in the late game, especially the second copy of this, where this will draw 6 or even 8 cards sometimes, and then completely put away with the game. So yeah, this is an interesting card in the market for control decks, maybe even in the main, just kind of to pull ahead enough to win and end the game by drawing enough extra resources that your opponent will be buried in card advantage. That's the way true control decks usually win. Obviously in Eternal we have a lot of these like mid-rangey control decks that just kind of more try to bury the opponent in material and like card quality and just kind of like overpower the opponent with a bunch of powerful units. But if you're like truly trying to like out-control the opponent, drawing a lot of cards is usually what you want to win the game and stifle them. And this seems like one of the better ways to do it. In Limited, if your deck is slow enough and late game oriented enough, this will do great as well there to end the game. But yeah, make sure that it fits your deck. In a lot of decks this will just be clunky and hurt your deck more than it helps, I think. Next we have Shalouk Captain, the blue version of the like Faction Lord, basically. It's a 6-cost 5/5 flying, which is pretty solid. It's one of the better ones. Not quite as good as the green and the red one, but probably the best after those. And yeah, your primal units have +1/+1. Unfortunately, this is still not constructed playable. Like the red and the green one are borderline constructed considerations, but this is just not strong enough. Like on 6 power, there's so many powerful things happening in constructed that this is just not gonna be able to compete. In Limited, however, this is obviously a bomb. A 6-cost 5/5 flyer alone is already amazing. And if you add +1/+1 to all your primal cards to it, this is just insane. So, slam dunk. And next we have Snow Sculptor, another cute and fun Yeti. It's a 6-cost 3/3 with Renown, and with Renown you draw cards equal to the cost of the spell or weapon. So yeah, not quite what you usually want to be doing with Yetis. First of all, triggering this with Renown, not so easy. Triggering it with something that has enough cost to draw a reasonable amount of cards to make up for this, not so easy. And then having a 6-cost 3/3, pretty bad. Also, Yetis want to be like more mid-rangey and aggressive, like we've seen the Yeti tribal mid-range aggro deck that Ahorn Delphine came up with and I tuned in a deck tech series. And yeah, this doesn't really fit what the Yetis usually want to be doing, so it's left in a pretty bad spot. In Limited, however, if you have good ways to trigger this and your deck is more like grindy and mid-rangey, I could see this making it into a draft deck, because yeah, it's kind of like Brilliant Idea in a way, except that it's cheaper and therefore might be pretty good in a draft deck to just kind of put away the game by triggering the Renown with something that costs 3 or 4. Next we have Quicksilver Mirror. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Yeah, this card, not so great, unfortunately. It's very expensive. It is kind of cool, but I don't think it's gonna do anything in Constructed. Costs triple primal at the start of your turn you play a copy of one of your units, so you basically get a mirror image at the start of your turn, every turn effectively. But yeah, it's a relic, it's slow, it requires a unit in play, that is good enough that this is worth it, and it probably needs to copy it at least twice to be remotely worth it, because then you get 2 mirror images for 1 power more out of 1 card. So yeah, a lot to ask for. Not seeing this in Constructed anytime soon. But in Limited, this is a great win condition, a great curve topper. You just slam this and it should win you the game almost every time, basically, as long as you have a half-decent unit to copy with. So feel free to put this in your draft deck unless it's aggressive. Next we have Starved Warlong. It's a 7 cost 6/6 Overwhelm, which is honestly a pretty solid stat line. We have the 7 cost 5/6 Overwhelm, I think it was, in Primal before, and this is straight up better without the Amplify. The other one I think cost 1 Primal, this cost double, but like at 7, double Primal is like not even a restriction really in any deck realistically. And yeah, then the Amplify obviously makes this insane. If you drop this on 9 as a 9/9 Overwhelm, this is ginormous and just should win you the game almost every time if the opponent doesn't have a removal for it, because Overwhelm and being this big is really hard to stop. So seems like a great curve topper for any Primal Limited deck. Obviously not a constructed card. And last but not least, we have the new Eileen. So 3rd Eileen already. Eileen the Rising Storm, she's an 8 cost 6/12, has Pledge. Pledge on such an expensive card is nice because normally if you have them in your opening hand they are virtual blanks, and now with Pledge you can just play her as power if you draw her in her opening hand and don't be hurt by having an 8-drop in your deck as much as you otherwise would. On summon she deals 6 damage to an enemy, which is a pretty solid effect actually, and the 12 health makes her very durable. Problem is her ultimate is just too situational and slow. Like the 3rd time Eileen attacks, she deals 12 damage to each enemy, which effectively makes her deal 10 damage a turn, so to speak. I mean, sure, it also kills their board, but it's not that likely that they're gonna have a whole lot of board if Eileen managed to attack 3 times without dying. So that effect is only like a marginal side effect and kind of situational. And yeah, so you kind of get like a 10-12 if she attacks often enough, but she has to attack 3 times, which is a lot. So yeah, not very impressed by the card. I don't think she's gonna see any play in Constructed. In Limited, however, she's still a bomb. Like 6/12 is very big and durable in Limited. Killing something the turn she comes down is also very strong. Pledge in your opening hand is great, and even the ultimate is more likely to come up in Limited than in Constructed. So all in all, a pretty good Limited card. Or even kind of a bomb. 8 is still a lot, so not sure if she's quite a bomb, but she's a pretty good Limited card, I think. Alright, that concludes the review of the Primal cards. As usual, I'll give you my top 5 for Primal. Here we go. Top 5 Primal cards. Clutch of Talon, no particular order as usual. Clutch of Talons, as I mentioned, seems like a really cool card, very flexible, should sort of define a top deck down the road. There should be at least one good deck playing Clutch of Talons, I think. We don't know what that's gonna be for now, but I think the card is definitely a potential constructed staple. Then we have the Innocuous Mischief Yeti. We haven't had like a good 1-drop in a while, and getting a constructed playable aggressive 1-drop in Primal to add to the selection is nice. I think the card has a future in Skycrag aggro, since getting a free snowball in that deck seems really powerful. Then we have Savagery, just kind of in here because it's pretty unique. The Overwhelm can work with some of the Infiltrate cards, and it kind of opens up the avenues to things like Felon Killers type stuff with Dark Return and so on. So yeah, an interesting card to keep an eye on, but not game-changing, I think. And then we have Brilliant Idea, kind of the card to fill the void that Channel the Tempest left in a lot of control decks, and a nice role player tool for controlling Primal decks, I think. And last but not least, we have the not so great but unique Storm Tamer Operative that I'm still not sure is gonna make any splash in Constructed, but definitely has a kind of cool and unique effect that might solve issues and do things that no other card could. So I added it here. And like I said, Primal not having a whole lot of great cards, so not that easy to even come up with 5 clear best cards, so to speak. So yeah, that's what we got. Don't even have a worthwhile honorable mention here again, because the Storm Tamer Operative would have probably been my honorable mention if the color had enough good cards, since it's a card that's unlikely to make it, but worth highlighting due to its uniqueness. But yeah, it just kind of made it into the top 5 because that's all we have. Okay, once again, if you haven't done so already, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content. Make sure to not miss out on future content by turning on the notification icon to be notified once there's new stuff being uploaded. I'm currently uploading daily with the review series and also doing deck text and stuff in between. Also, you can find all the social media info that you can see here as well in the description. Follow me on Twitter, like my Facebook page, and follow me on Twitch to catch me live streaming. I'm streaming a lot more Eternal again, almost daily if I can, with the new set. It's much more interesting and fun again to brew and dry stuff. And yeah, it's always cool to hang out with you guys and have a good time on stream anyway, as long as the game is fun enough to play for hours. Okay, one last thing, if you haven't done so already in the beginning, I want to urge you once again to please whitelist eternaltitans.com and YouTube on your ad block to help support the free content with ads and help our team website grow and my YouTube channel to do this more and more long term. Alright, thanks everyone for watching. This was the Eternal set review with Defiance Primal Part 3. I'm your host Manuel. I thank you for watching, and I see you next time with Shadow.